Welcome to Love Unleashed. I'm your host, Erin Davis.
So today I sit down with Dr. Manijeh Badiee. She's a polyamorous professor and psychologist who's worked with polyamorous clients for over a decade. She's got quite an interesting personal life of her own, and I cannot wait to find out more. Hi, Dr. Manijeh Badiee. Welcome to the show. It's so nice to meet you.
It's so lovely to be here.
How are you? Tell me what's been going on. Tell me what's going on in your life. I'm so happy that we're finally meeting in person. I know we've been in touch over the last couple weeks. So tell me what you're up to. What's going on?
I have been just enjoying my summer. I get summers off from teaching because I'm a professor. So at the summers, I teach a little less and I have a little bit of a break. So I've just been enjoying life with my two partners, my two life partners, my step kiddo, and my two dogs.
All right, wait.
And
okay.
two Pettimore cats.
All right, okay, awesome. You've got a lot going on. So you have two life partners. And
Yes.
Tell me what you teach too as a professor. Okay, but two life partners, I have to stop you there. So tell me what's that? How do you have two life partners?
Sure. So I have two life partners. Basically, one of them I've been with. One of them I'm legally married to, and I live with. So I've been with him for 2009. So about 15 years.
What? Okay.
And then my other partner, my lady friend, I've been with her for through about 3.5 years. And we are life partners in the sense that, major life decisions, I consider them, I commit to regular time with them, weekly time. So, and they're just a major part of my life, and they're prioritized. And I try to decenter my spouse. Well, I don't even think of him as it's just so weird. We're legally married, but I think of him more as my partner, even though, so I try to there's something called couple privilege that you get when you are married to someone, when you live with someone, you get certain privileges if you're a married couple. Everybody exalts your relationship. It's very much accepted. All of a sudden, I noticed such a difference in how that relationship is treated versus my relationship with my lady friend who I don't live with. And so there's a big difference in how they're treated. But for me, they're both my life partners, and I try to see them as equally important and unlearn parts where I see him as more important, if that makes sense.
Okay, it's a lot. I have so many questions. First of all, okay, I have so many questions.
Sure.
How did you meet? I'm going to just call him your husband, okay, even though he's a life partner. So tell me how you met him, okay, and how you broached this whole subject. And I even want to know, is the lady friend in his life too? So start at the beginning. Tell me, yes, and tell me how the whole thing began. How did you meet him? Let's start with that.
Well, interestingly enough, we met we're both Iranian. So we're both from Iran originally. And we met through just Iranian gatherings when we both lived in Texas. So it wasn't something our parents wanted us to meet or something. It was just, we just saw each other at gatherings because our parents were friends.
Okay.
So we became really good friends, and throughout us living in different places, we still stayed in touch, and we were pretty much best friends for about 7 years. And then we fell in love. We became friends with benefits, and then we fell in love. And it was during the Green Revolution of Iran. So there was a lot of protests going on for democracy. And it was just a really emotional time. And it was where our love just blossomed. And this person that I'd been friends with for so long became a life partner. And before that process, when we were friends, we had talked about non-monogamy. We had talked about while we were friends, we talked about monogamy doesn't really fit for us. We believe in feminism. We believe in nobody owns your body. So what I do with my body when I'm somewhere else, nobody owns that. So we were very much our values just really aligned with being non-monogamous. And then we found resources and articles, and eventually we found the language for it. But we actually formed some of our values together, and we aligned with a lot of the values where we didn't feel like monogamy fit.
Wow. So you guys were equally on this journey. It sounds like you're both in
Yes.
it together. First thing I have to ask is I've worked with the Iranian population, and my work is in immigration. I was an immigration project manager for years, and then I was a diplomat. How did this go over with the Iranian community and your families? Like, how did you broach the subject, and what happened?
Well, so when we first got married, let's see, in 2011, was when we got married. And at that time, we weren't out about being polyamorous. We were polyamorous and we were practicing polyamory, but it's not something that necessarily our parents knew. Our siblings knew, people that were maybe close to us, all of our friends knew. Anyone that I would, like have interaction with that I felt like I was gonna, it was something that I was out about in my life, but I lived apart from the Iranian communities. So we weren't out about it, and then we told our families. There was mixed responses. It's hard for them to take in that we are polyamorous. Is something that's really hard to understand, especially because I dated more publicly than my partner, and he's male. And there's this like kind of acceptance of like, if a man does unethical non-monogamy, like he cheats, there's like more acceptance of that than a woman having the ability to have multiple partners openly and honestly. And they've done research on this as well. Like, people think it's more moral to cheat than to like be openly non-monogamous.
Yes. I was going to say, in the monogamy world, I actually think there's a stigma as well. So why don't you define for us, it's funny because I tried to describe to my parents what ethical non-monogamy is, because it's popping up on dating apps all the time. As a dating coach, my clients come to me, what is ENM? Try to define it. I know there's a wide spectrum of ways that we can practice or discuss polyamory, but why don't you discuss what exactly it means and what ethical non-monogamy is?
Absolutely. I think that's a really great point about definitions. So it's very confusing. And, people do define these in different ways. I will caveat it by saying that. So like, I try to defer to how people define it for themselves, but I will tell you some generally agreed upon definitions within the community and within academic as well. Although I have a challenge to one of the academic ones. So, okay, your question is, what is ethical non-monogamy? So I'll back up and say that I personally, when I talk about non-monogamy, I don't use the words ethical and consensual, because there's this inherent assumption that it's always wrong to be non-monogamous, that no matter what, it's immoral and it's wrong. So I feel like by having to qualify it with words like consensual and ethical, like that perpetuates that idea that it's inherently wrong. So I have to tell you that I'm doing it ethically. Whereas if you do, like with monogamy, we assume that it's ethical, right? And yet we know that there's, I was just looking up the statistics. I think it was something like 60% of US marriages are affected by infidelity, 20 to 40% of marriages end in infidelity, right? So like, that's like the automatic response people have, which I do think is unethical, but nobody assumes that monogamy is unethical just because you say monogamy, right?
Right.
So that's why even though in academic, they do use the word consensual, and sometimes in the community, they do use ethical, but I personally don't use those because I don't want to perpetuate that idea. But obviously, any relationship structure, people can do it unethically,
of course,
and such. So when we're talking about it, doing non-monogamy in an ethical sense, it means that everyone is consenting, everyone is fully informed of the multiple partners. Like, doesn't mean that they have. So like, let's say there's 3 partners, doesn't mean that they have all the information about them, but they know that they are dating those people.
Okay.
Sometimes they meet, sometimes they don't meet. If they don't meet, generally that's called like parallel polyamory. And then if they do meet, it's like more kitchen table dynamic, because the partners can hang out. Okay. So there's these different ways, like there's a whole spectrum of how the partners could interact. People assume like it's always the throuple, right? Or like a triad, but that is actually the hardest relationship structure to do, but it's like the one that's most represented. And unfortunately it ends up being unethical because it is just so hard to do it, to do it in an ethical way. And not that it's there's beautiful triads, there's beautiful thruples, but it's just that it's a more advanced type.
It's hard enough to manage a relationship with one person, in my opinion. So I'm like, God, throw in a second one all together, which is a thruple triad, right?
Well, and there's a relationship with you with each partner, and then there's a relationship with the triad as a whole and their relationships with each other. So there's all these different relationships. It's not just, there's 3 relationships. There's, it multiplies. And so, so I feel like I got away from the question, but.
No, it's fascinating. So no, you're helping define it first. So thank you for seeing it.
Yes.
Because my parents literally thought when I tried to describe it in similar terms to what you did, non-monogamy, they said, oh, swingers. My mom was like, yeah, I know what those types of people are. They're swingers. And I said, okay, that's a definition in some way, yes. And that's how they can relate from their own experiences, what they've seen in the 1970s, for example. But it's so much more complex, and it seems like there's so many different ways to practice this. So I'm still curious too, to go back to your personal situation, because I really have so many questions about when you and your now husband brought it up very early in your friendship, it sounds like. When do you think people these days should bring it up? When you were talking about the ethics of it, you said it's consensual, it's being informed. When do you bring it up? That's a question I get all the time.
I think at the very beginning, I think it's important to just share it unless there's a safety issue. Like maybe you don't feel safe, but even then, let's say you don't feel, for example, I mean, personally, I like to put it on my dating profile, but maybe that's not safe for some people just because of where they work. So for them to be out, they can't put it on their profile necessarily. But I think in an early conversation for sure, as you're, in those first conversations, I think it's important to talk about it because, we can't, in this world that is more monocentric, people do assume that you are monogamous. So I think it's important to share your relationship structure. I also think monogamous people can ask about those things too. I think, to talk about, what kinds of relationships you want. I mean, I guess I should say, if it's just maybe a sexual relationship or something that's not going to be something, more, maybe something more casual, maybe I could see in that case, I don't know, maybe it might be different because the level of intimacy is different. So maybe you're not going to talk about relationships, but that's because you're not really necessarily on wanting a relationship, either of you want a relationship. So that's a little of a different situation, I think. But still, I think it's important to be honest about, I think it's still important to be honest about generally.
When I had first heard about polyamory, I thought, oh, isn't that just dating? Because I was like, aren't we not exclusive if we're just dating somebody? And it's so much more than that. It's because you get to a level of intimacy. Mm-hmm. So how do you, to some people, I guess they can't even understand, how is this not cheating? Is it because you're communicating? Is a partner ever jealous? Have you experienced that in your own journey, that a partner was jealous, it got messy? What happened?
Yes, and actually, I want to go back to your earlier comment about swingers because I think that's important in framing this conversation, that there are lots of different, under the term non-monogamy, there's lots of different types of it. Right. So there are swingers who tend to be more sexually non-monogamous, but not necessarily emotionally non-monogamous, right? So they might have sexual partners, maybe they do it together, maybe they do it separate, but they don't necessarily have the maybe allowance in their relationship to have emotional attachments to other people or to be committed to other people, because you can be asexual. You don't have to be necessarily, or aromantic. It could be a commitment. So I think so that's important to consider. Within polyamory, you basically have the capacity and the allowance in your relationship to not just be sexually non-monogamous, but to have committed partners. Like for me, in my case, I have 2 committed life partners. That doesn't fit into a swinger or open definition that's more sexually non-monogamous. It's on the side of there is sexual non-monogamy, but there's also this emotional, this commitment as well in the non-monogamy. So I just want to say that, and I'm polyamorous specifically. So a lot of the stuff that I'll now talk about is specific to polyamory because there are differences, and research has shown there's some differences. Okay, so going back to your question, you were saying, like, I think you were asking, how would you, trying to get back to your question.
It's the jealousy and the cheating stigma I get from a lot of my clients
The jealousy,
who
yes.
ask me, or they'll tell me, somebody has talked to me about being non-monogamous, and I just can't fathom it, because wouldn't you be jealous? Wouldn't you be? Is it cheating? And have you ever had those feelings yourself? Like what is enticing to you, specifically you, on about non-monogamy? Why is it a fit for you? I guess.
Well, it's who I am. I mean, it's not even like it's a fit. It's like saying, why are you monogamous? Because it's just who you are.
Yeah.
And it's always been who I am. I never was able to fit into to monogamy.
Okay.
Even like from my early days of dating, sometimes it was making out at a party. Sometimes it was just like flirting. And I didn't fit into like what are sometimes very strict standards of monogamy. But I was always very honest. I would always tell the person immediately. And, so as far as, so for me in my journey, yes, I've gotten jealous, to answer your question.
Because I feel like naturally you probably don't. If you're saying it's who you are, this is a good fit for you, maybe you don't get as jealous as somebody who's into monogamy. But you have.
Yeah, I have, I believe, as a therapist, as a psychologist, I believe we should experience the full range of emotions. Yeah. And I think that's actually a very healthy thing. And I think we shouldn't, personally, what I help my clients do is face their emotions and process their emotions, not avoid things because of their emotions, not avoid things because of their jealousy, not avoid things because of their fear, which sometimes, unfortunately, not always, but monogamy can be very fear-based. Like, I'm doing this to prevent this, when it doesn't actually prevent like someone from cheating, obviously. It doesn't prevent someone from emotionally attaching to someone else or having sex with someone else. We know that it doesn't, but people want to kind of put that restriction on it. And so, and again, it does work for some people, and it's a great fit for some people. It's just that, like, I think there needs to be a wider range of ways. So as far as getting jealous, I got more jealous at the beginning of my relationship. And sometimes when a new relationship comes in and I'm just like, oh, what's going on? And I will say that for me, jealousy has been such a gift. I'm not saying I like it. It's not enjoyable, obviously.
Yeah.
But when it comes, I sit with it and I ask, what is this trying to tell me?
Mm-hmm.
Is it telling me that I'm missing time with my partner? Am I like insecure about something? Is it because I think this person might take my partner away? I really try to face it and see what it's telling me. And then I say, okay, do I have reassurance for those questions? Okay, within myself, like maybe I know my partner has said such and such, so I can reassure myself with that. Maybe I do need some reassurance from my partner, and maybe I need something from my partner. Maybe it's signaled a need I have with my partner. Maybe it's signaled an insecurity that I had back when I was a child. Who knows? But the point is, I learned from it, and then I face it and I process it, and I end up like becoming more self-aware, becoming, I think, a better partner. So to me, there's actually research has shown there's no difference in jealousy between people that are polyamorous and not.
I was just going to say,
how you deal with it.
I was just
you don't avoid it. You just find ways to, like any other emotion that we like, I want to help bring forth. They're all valid.
Yes.
Obviously, we don't want to let them be completely unregulated or harm people, right? But anger, sadness, jealousy, all of those things are important to understand. They're signals. They're telling us something about ourselves, about the world. So I believe in understanding that.
No, it's everything you were saying resonates with me as a monogamous person, because I think even in monogamous relationships, we feel jealousy. And I am all about communicating that jealousy, because otherwise it can be channeled into very harmful, toxic activity in a relationship, right? Mm-hmm. But typically, it can stem from an insecurity. So I think that, we just simply communicate about it in a monogamous relationship. But when you look at polyamory, you have, to me, it's an added challenge. You really have to talk about a lot of things here and I guess create boundaries and rules. The couples I've worked with as a dating coach that are polyamorous, I've realized that it has been very helpful for them to come up with what they'd like to share and where they draw the line. So they may be aware that they're in sexual relationships with other people, but they have boundaries where they say, you can't bring your partners into our home. Or you can't spend a certain amount of money on your partner, or I don't want to know the details of what you practice sexually with your partner. Have you found that you've had boundaries or rules that you've needed to communicate with both of your life partners? I'd love to know how much they know about each other.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. So I want to distinguish between boundaries and rules.
Okay.
Which boundaries are, what do I need to be safe? What do I need to feel safe in my body, safe emotionally? And so it's saying like, this is the space I need. This is what I need to be safe. A rule is saying you can't do this. Like you are not allowed to do this, right? And I think that people often start out with a lot of rules. And I certainly did have more rules like, oh, can't, be with your partner in our bed, or like these kinds of rules. And I probably needed them in that time to feel safe because not everybody goes into polyamory with a partner. People can go in solo. There's such thing as solo polyamory, where your own primary partner. So people can go into it solo. But for me personally, I went into it with my partner. So for us, like that was a really big sort of part. Like, I feel like, when you go into it, like with a partner, you sort of have to just unpack a lot of things and like try to understand a lot of those things. And so for me, I don't really have any rules anymore. We have boundaries. Like there's certain things, like if let's say a partner like is not kind to me or something, maybe I'll say like, oh, I don't necessarily want to interact with them. But if it's like a big event like your birthday or something, then I will do it, like something like that. That would be like a boundary, like for I need to feel safe. But as far as, and obviously there's those sexual boundaries as well, right? So there's and there's actually research about that too, that non-monogamous people are communicate more and use safer sex practices than unethical non-monogamous people. I mean, yeah. So like people who are cheating basically, because they don't, obviously if you're cheating, you're kind of like hiding it a lot, So as far as like that stereotype, that's also not true that, oh, people are polyamorous are just being so sexually risky. So that's another, I think, things, but so people sometimes, start out with rules like that, like, oh no, not in my bed, or maybe you can't emotionally attach to this person. And for some people that might work really well. Some people are just only sexually non-monogamous. For some people though, that can be something that changes over time. So like they could end up forming an emotional attachment, let's say, and then you have to renegotiate and revisit and, but it's no more unstable than any other relationship structure. Like, sometimes your needs change in monogamy too, so needs can just change and just need to be rediscussed and renegotiated. So I think one big key is just talking about it. Just having those open conversations with yourself.
Yeah.
And with your partners, like honestly, with yourself is so important to listen to yourself, listen to your body, your heart. Like, what are you like? Are you trying to be something like you don't want to be? Like, are you trying to be like something? Yeah, you know what I mean? Like those things can be so restrictive. So we have to really learn that to listen to ourselves.
I love what you said about renegotiating, because I work with primarily monogamous couples, right? And they almost have a fear. They say, well, we've been together 5 years. What if things get boring? What if we don't feel the same way about each other? They just want to leave. They think divorce is the only option and breaking up is the only option. And I've kind of, as a dating coach, mediator, I've kind of stepped in and said, why don't we recalibrate? Why don't we sit down? Sometimes I've even done trial separations for monogamous couples to kind of come back together and, like you said, renegotiate. Whatever that may be. And it's not always sexual. It's not always even emotional. Sometimes it's just that they have different needs. I'll have couples that end up going to live apart and not necessarily divorcing or breaking up, but just kind of saying, well, what did society tell you that you have to be as a monogamous couple? Why don't we talk about like what you want? And I've tried to modernize the definition of even just what a relationship is these days, because a lot of my clients fear marriage, for example, because they say marriage means this. And I said, says who? it can mean whatever you want it to be as long as everybody communicates. So I feel like all the lessons you're giving are incredibly applicable to every type of relationship and every type of human being, because it's about communication and it's about like being in touch with yourself, and learning about how to express it. And I feel like you're amazing at that. So tell me about the biggest struggles you've had with your two life partners, and how did you get this second life partner? How did she come into your life, and what difficulties did you experience?
So I will say for me, okay, so and then you also had asked me something else about and then have they met? Yes. Okay. So I've been officially polyamorous since 2011, I would say. And I've sought partners since then. Interestingly enough, I was thinking we're going to talk about dating apps. I've met all of my dating partners except for one that I met through a friend, through OkCupid, actually.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, me personally, I've dated. So same with this partner. So we actually started talking during the pandemic, and so we, it was very, very, very slow. Like we just started, chatting, and it took us like a few months to meet. I think we had taken tests, COVID tests and such. So, as far as, so I had other partners. I think, for me, like, I only started dating women. So I came out as bisexual to myself, like when I was 17, but I didn't start actually dating femmes and people that were non-binary, like people of other genders besides men, until I was in my 30s. So it's like since I've been polyamorous is when I've been exploring my queerness. So it was tied together for me, it was tied together. It's not the case with everybody. Some people, those are very separate identities. For me, I've always wanted like masculine and feminine energy. Like that's always been so important to me, romantically have those energies.
I try to find that in a man. I want to find both of those energies in a man. So I get it. I want the big masculine, like buffed up gym rat, but has the heart and can cry and watch Lifetime Hallmark movies and stuff with me, So I get it, but you were like, that doesn't exist. I understand. It's that hard. So you found it.
No, it's not that it doesn't exist. It's the energy, but I also romantically, it's something that I really like. If I'm not with a woman also, or someone, could be someone non-binary as well. Like just getting some femme energy, like I don't feel as happy. I don't feel as like connected. It's just part of who I am. Like it's, having that love for two people, but I've never had a life partner until this partner. Like the other partners that I had were long-term partners as well, like a year, 2 years, 3 years. But this is my first like life partner. And and she really wanted to meet my nesting partner early on, because she wanted to just make sure everything was okay. So they actually got along really well, and they have some things in common. Like they love action movies, which I don't like at all. So like it's so cute. And then also like I grew up in a family of teasing. Everybody teased each other. And so they tease me together. They like gang up on me. And I just love it so much because I'm like, this is love. Like
the flirt to roast ratio. It's important. Okay. So they have it.
So they kind of roast me. So like they have a very cute relationship. We do stuff together sometimes. Like we like plays. We all like musicals. So we'll all go to like
the three of you will go.
Yeah. And sometimes so she has her bio kid, which is my step kid as well. So sometimes she goes with us as well. Big happy family. So that's, and I'm trying to think of your other question. So you asked me about how they get along.
The challenges, because you actually took it there. I was going to ask, as being bisexual, well, how does that fit in? Does that make it easier or harder? It almost sounds like it makes it easier, as an understanding with your nesting partner, your husband. Is he bi also?
He's not bi. It's easier in the sense that I think like men have less of a reaction
That's
to
what I was gonna
dating.
say.
And it's really like, in my opinion, it's queer phobic because like my love for a woman is actually very intense, so it's kind of silly for me to say that to think that. But I think that's something that is still a process to overcome. My nesting partner, he's definitely a feminist. It's something that he has unlearned. But for me, like if there's like a spectrum, right? So like maybe you've heard of the Kinsey scale, right?
Yes,
It's
yes.
like,
I was going to ask you.
From there. So if there's bisexuality right in the middle in terms of like if we define it as 50-50, I'm more on the side, like I'm more attracted to femme people than I am attracted to men, but I'm so attracted to my male partner. But I'm attracted to way more women. So, but
Okay.
I do like also acknowledge that that's not a rule in my relationship. So like if I were to date someone male, which I have, that would be something that would be allowed for me to do. It's just that I just don't find as many, I'm just more attracted to women. So if I'm like when I connect with someone, it's usually going to be femme or a non-binary person that has like some femme energy. Like that's what I'm more attracted to. So,
Well, do you think he'd be more jealous if there were guys? Like if you had picked up a male partner, was he more jealous? Like
he was more jealous with men because he was not jealous at all, actually. But it did come up with a man, but it was really like, it was rough, but I also remembered my early days where I was really jealous and I didn't handle it well. So I was like, okay, at least we both got a turn on this. But it ended up turning into some amazing conversations like that we both really grew from. It was also something that happened kind of fast. So that was also a little bit hard for like both of us to navigate. There's something in, we call in polyamory, new relationship energy, NRE, which is like that infatuation you get, right? So that can be hard. Like if you're,
I'm going to use that term now because we all have it.
Yeah, new
and a lot of
relationship
singles
energy.
think they get carried away with it, and you have to realize it does morph. You know, you've been with your nesting partner for a very, very long time. You know the NRE, it fades. I don't even like to say fades. It transforms and it turns into something that's very deep, but it's not that same energy. So you're right. When you pick up a new partner, they have to deal with witnessing your NRE, right? And vice versa. Like, is he dating somebody now?
He dates, he's dating, he has other partners, and my lady friend as well. They both date. None of us are close.
Oh, I was going to ask you. I'm making a web in my head here, like a little tree.
We call it a polycule.
Okay, cool. Oh, cool. All right. That's,
So I have 2 life partners, and then they have other partners as well. And then, I have friends who are like, I consider chosen family that, cause again, it's about like we were talking earlier, decentering like this idea of couple above everything, which is very much like from colonization, from capitalism, this idea that one nuclear family, monogamous, heteronormative, that is the standard. And that's what we should all aspire to when there's so many different, and throughout time, like there's been so many ways that people do different things than than that specifically. Right. But I think just, it's for me, polyamory is about letting your relationships grow as they would. Like people are like, well, it's all about the sex. And it's like, well, no, it's about having the capacity for your relationships to just develop organically without restriction. And for me, since my heart has the capacity to love multiple people without taking away from another person, like to me, it's just it's like part of just love. Like to me, like love just multiplies. There's also another term I want to share with you that I really love that I think you'll like. So it's not the opposite of jealousy, which some people think of it as opposite of jealousy but you can have this with jealousy actually. But something that I have less of now is jealousy when my partners are with other people. And because I don't feel as insecure, because I feel really stable in these relationships. But what I do have is something called compersion, which is the joy of seeing your partner being made happy with someone else.
Wow.
Yeah. And there's a new book about it actually called What is Compersion by Dr. Mary Tuen, where she talks about there's 4 different kinds of compersion. There's emotional compersion, like you are, like what I was saying, the joy. And there's also like you can be compersive in your ethics, in your thoughts. Like I'm going to choose to value my other partner's relationships. You can also show compersion in your behavior, like doing nice things for your partner when they get back. And then compersion can also, the 4th one is it can extend to other contexts. So again, this is an area where I think anyone, regardless of your relationship structure, we don't have a word. Like it shouldn't just be restricted to non-monogamy. But what are that word that you have joy when someone else you love is joy, even if it might be something taking away from you. Like if a friend got a big promotion and they move away from you, but you might be sad, right? And you still have this joy for them. Like there should be a word for that.
It's the opposite of Schadenfreude. I love how in German there's words
Yes.
for things that we don't have, right?
Yes.
And I'm already like, my brain is just churning with thinking of how many couples I've worked with where they're monogamous and then they get divorced, and they should have joy for their partner for moving on when it's time for that to happen, right? And then I think of I deal with a lot of women who are single and childless in their 40s and very sad and upset about it, and they feel sad when they have friends who have baby showers and they get pregnant. And I think this word compersion is actually so applicable. It's a beautiful thing to achieve. I almost feel like it's like a spiritual, religious type of thing to obtain, that's really beautiful. So you feel that. So you've actually found a way that jealousy can be twisted and turned and dealt with, and then turned into this beautiful product.
Yeah, and I don't want to connect it to jealousy,
Right.
because like you can feel both at the same time.
Yeah.
You like your clients, you were saying, they're feeling that maybe they could feel that joy and the grief at the same time, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
I think
really good point.
Adrienne Marie Brown says, to love is to grieve, right?
Yes.
Like just opening your heart to love, like you open yourself up to grief, right? So so research also shows we can't just selectively numb our emotions. So if we like numb our sadness, we're also numbing our joy and our laughter. Like we can't just pick and choose which ones we want to numb. So I think like with what you were talking about, acknowledging both of those within yourself, like I can hold this grief and I can honor it and I can have joy, and maybe because of my grief, maybe I can't do this event where there's all these kids, but maybe I can do this other nice thing for my friend that will honor myself, but also and my boundaries, but also like show that I have this joy for my friend,
Yeah.
So it could be like holding space, but I think it's important to hold space for all those experiences.
Yeah.
Like the joy that there's a really amazing poem called Guest House by the Persian poet Rumi. It's all about
Rumi.
like,
I used to quote
such a
Rumi
great
all the
poem.
time.
It's all about like let it in, like the joy, the meanness, the like all of these, the anger, the malice, because all of them are, let them in like guests. And in Persian culture, guests are so exalted. So like that's really like you're letting them really, really in when Rumi says that, you're really letting them in because they may be clearing you out for some delight and welcome them honorably like guests. So like saying guests is very like, so
You're
it's
such
just,
a good therapist. I feel like people
Thanks.
come to me and they want to squash down certain feelings, and I'm one of those. You can feel everything, and I think you should feel them strongly and fully, whether it's grief, whether it's depression, anything. I deal with a lot of people who break up, and it's awful to go through the breakup, but I encourage them to feel it. And it's okay to still be grieving, and then as you move on, you can do both. You can do both. Same with mourning a loved one and then moving on through that. And I'm all about harnessing all the feelings. And you're like a living accompaniment, and you promote it. You really endorse doing that. And I think it makes your relationships probably very strong. Do you feel secure with where you are now? Are you going to be looking for other partners too, in addition to these two, or what is your capacity personally?
well, so I feel like I do feel secure in these relationships. If I were to connect with another person, it wouldn't be because like I, am missing something in my current relationships or anything like that. It would just be because I happen to connect with another person, if that makes sense.
Are you seeking? Like, would you?
I'm not necessarily seeking anyone because with two life partners and I'm like, in addition to my full-time job as a professor, my business, Polytherapist Psychology Corporation, which I do therapy and consulting and speaking through that, is also something that I'm really investing in right now. It's almost like another partner. Yeah, it's like another partner. So I think like for me, my heart's very full. My schedule's very full. And then between my friends that I really hold dear and try to make time for as well. So I feel like for me, I'm not really seeking, not that I would be completely closed off if it happens. But I'm at the point in my polyamory journey after like 15 years, honestly. I feel so much joy when my partners date other people. Like I get so excited. I'm like, oh, that's so, like, I hope this turn works out. And it really like makes me happy to see them be happy. Cause I'm like, you know, I've had other partners, like y'all have had compersion for me and, you know, been supportive, and I have, you know, and so I love seeing them also, you know, getting maybe different parts of themselves, like honored with different partners and getting treated well. And I'm like, why not like be happy for my partner? Like they're smiling. Why does it matter if I put that smile or not? Like they're smiling. I'm happy. Like that makes me so happy to see, you know? And so for me, I'm at the point where I like going to places and seeing, and I've had a lot of experiences at this point. So I'm like a polyam elder, I think, like in some ways, because I'm like, oh, I've done a lot of like fun things, and I'm like, and I still like to do them, but I'm like, I also get a lot of joy out of seeing people that I love, like going through that for the first time. I'm like, oh, that's so exciting, you know?
Is there an age difference with your partners, either of them, with you?
I'm a little older, yeah. So I'm 1 year older than my lady friend and 3 years older than my.
I love that you call her a lady friend. Can you really fall deeply in love with two people? Do you really? I mean, I love The Bachelor. It's like my favorite show. So when they're down to the final two, I'm like, can you really equally love both of these people? And in my heart, I don't think so. But again, that's a monogamous relationship, right? Mm-hmm. And this is what was natural to you. Do you really, you're deeply in love with both? Would you say it's equal, as awful as that word is, or it's just different but just as strong?
I think like it's, how would I say this? Equality is a term that I would stay away from. Equity, like how are their needs being met? So like equality assumes like there's something that's kind of same for both. So I would say there's definitely equity, and there's a really amazing polyamorous leader in the community. Her name is Shanae Jackson Kendall, and she's like, I love her stance on how she views like, not necessarily hierarchy, but like how she views like her relationships, which is that a partner, my partners at 1 year, they're going to have the same access to me that long-term partner had at 1 year, right? With the exception of legally marrying, because I can't legally marry someone, but like they'll have the same access to me. So my male partner, I mean, we've been together for, you know, like 15 years, and my lady friend, we've been together like almost 4 years now. So like there's a difference in just the experiences that you've had together, but there's not a difference in love, I would say. I think my love is very, like, I miss her so much when I don't see her. You know, we see each other, so basically I go there twice, or either I go there or she comes twice a week. So we see each other like twice a week. So I see her very regularly, and
but you live with him.
But
right?
I live with him, yeah. And neither one of us, my lady friend, like we both know we're not compatible with living together, and she doesn't want to live with a partner either.
Okay.
Yeah, so she also really enjoys living with her kiddo, and they like, and you know, she likes to live alone. Like she enjoys living alone. She enjoys just keeping the house. You know, some people just prefer living alone, and so it works out great for us because she's like, you know, 7 minutes away driving. So like it works out great for us because we see each other regularly, and we do a lot of fun things together, but we also don't live together, which we know is not compatible. Because like you're saying, you know, some people,
relationships too.
Some people live in different bedrooms, or you know, like so I think exactly, like it's about finding what works for you, and I think anyone can do that. Anyone can really say like, what are the boundaries, or like you said, how do I want to reinvent this relationship? Like when you know things are getting kind of boring, maybe it's about like, you know, dating each other, just going on dates with each other, and like just getting to know each other as you are now. Because a lot of times we change and we get really into the nitty gritty and we don't, you know, check in. Another thing that I think is a good lesson that I've learned in polyamory that I think could apply to anyone is a lot of times we discuss topics when we're really heated with our partners. So it's important to like set aside those times to just check in when you're both feeling okay. And so that I think is also very important. There's a really good format for it called Radar. That's from a podcast called Polyamory, and that one it is for non-monogamous folk, but like you can definitely cater it to any relationship style. But it gives like some different areas that like you could potentially check in about, like things that you might not think about, like financial, pets, and then you can decide like what are the topics of conversation that we're going to have in this monthly check-in that we do.
Great.
So that's been really
with
helpful.
Everyone. And
Yeah.
So too. Yeah.
Absolutely, because it's not a great time to discuss, and that's usually we usually talk about things when they're boiling over
Right.
and they're like so intense, and we can't communicate as well. It's not a good time.
Of course, that's a great piece of general advice. And to me, for everyone, right? I'm also super curious. I've been thinking of this as you're talking. Do you think that polyamorous people can then become monogamous? Like, say they're not with a partner, but they've been polyamorous for years, and then they meet somebody, and I see this all the time, who only believes in monogamy, and they say, sure, I'll do that. Or vice versa, a monogamous person who's dating somebody who then encourages polyamory. Do you believe that they can go back and forth? I'm asked this all the time.
That's a great question.
I haven't studied a case long enough, or I haven't studied a relationship long enough to see if it works, if they can kind of switch sides.
Absolutely. So I think that's such a great point. So we can see our own polyamory in a variety of ways. For some of us, it's an identity. For me personally, it's my identity. I was always polyamorous before I had the words for it, and then as soon as I had the words for it, all the puzzle pieces fit. I had so much shame before. It's not like I stopped being polyamorous because I just was very ashamed of myself, and I felt like a bad person for being that way. So once I found the language, I was able to talk about it, and it's part of my identity. Some people consider it part of their relational orientation, similar to like a sexual orientation,
Right.
in which case it's also part of them. There are people that more consider it like a practice. So maybe like more of a behavioral practice. So they can maybe do it in this context and the other context. And actually there's a subset of people that identify as ambiamorous, which means that you would be equally happy in a polyamorous or a monogamous relationship. So there are people that are equally happy in both. So that's also something that we should make room for.
We should. I've heard that, and I've been skeptical. Like, I've actually dated guys who've told me they were in polyamorous relationships previously, and it made me self-conscious. I'm like, am I going to be enough? And I didn't even know that term existed. I think that's really important. I think people need to just discuss this more in general. And now, as you probably know, speaking of dating apps, Hinge now has a field for monogamy, dating type, non-monogamy. It's actually a field now, and it used to just be like homosexual, heterosexual. So it's even transforming, and that's where I'm starting to get questions from my clients, like, I want to tick off this box, but I need to explain it further. And they want to talk about what it means to them. So speaking of that, where do you think people should go and look if they want to explore polyamory? Is there a dating app you recommend? Is there a safe place? Are there events? I know we can speak to Los Angeles, but in general, how do you think people should meet and explore this these days?
So I think the dating apps, we mentioned a couple that I think are friendly to non-monogamous folk, like OkCupid. Personally, I really like that one. Field also, like you said. Fed can be one that it does have overlap with kink, but there can be, so it's kind of like a mixed one, which people can definitely be polyamory and kinky, but but polyamory is not necessarily kink, but there is some room for people who are non-monogamous there that are not kinky as well. So that can be sometimes a place to go. And then I would say it is more intimidating, but if you can go to in-person events, I think that's just a good way to make community, which I think is regardless.
Acceptance, identity.
Yes, regardless. If you're going to go into any kind of non-monogamy, I think it's really, I actually have been reflecting on how it's just as important to have a supportive community as it is to have good partners. Because really, you get a lot of shame from the outside population. People don't get it. So it's important to have that supportive community. So I think going and building community can be a really good first step. Like if you think, oh, let me see how this is. Let me explore non-monogamy. So last week there was a week that Open Love, an organization hosted that was called the Week of Non-Monogamy Visibility. And there was other organizations involved that sponsored it as well. And so that was a really great chance. They had some virtual programming, and they did a lot of different aspects, like the history and culture of non-monogamy throughout time, like, and all these ways that non-monogamy was practiced. It was really interesting. Like, that was one of the topics. So it was a really great week. So events like that. And as far as finding local groups, Facebook, like, a lot of times you can find a local group. So I just search for like either your county, your region, your city, and polyamory, depending on how big, your city, like, if
gotta be harder in certain cities, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Like, if you're in a big city, you can just search the city probably, but otherwise you might have to look a little bit. So Facebook, also like Meetup, like looking up groups through Meetup. And then Instagram also, there's groups through there. So I would say if you're able to go to an in-person event, I think that can be, just so much is lost via text, and online dating also has its issues where certain people are favored over others. There's a whole politics to desirability, right? So, like, for example, like, white women may be much more favored, over like black women, or, there's these kinds of like just things that can happen with online dating that obviously can happen in person too, with in person too. But I think people sometimes make those snap judgments. And there's, they've looked at, like, some of the dating sites have looked at some of those preferences within. Yeah. So I think
that's with monogamy too. Everybody, we all want to meet in person, don't we?
All right. Okay, yeah. So that's what I would encourage. But yeah.
Okay, good. So you do. So there's those events are in LA right now.
Yes,
right?
yes.
I mean, I found you through the Instagram group. It's called LA Polyamory, right?
Yes, Los Angeles Polyamory is a great one if you're in LA. They have really great events. So there's actually one this Sunday, which probably by the time this airs, it won't be.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's like I think they're a great one to follow on Instagram if you're in LA, because there's like regular events like beach day events.
Yeah.
Just fun social things.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, what would you say, I do want to kind of close out on this, because I'm so fascinated by the fact that you're also Iranian, and I have so many friends in the Iranian community. What would you say, how does that shape your identity now, your Iranian identity, and have you found that the Iranian community is more accepting now than when you first came out? And we talked about this, when you first talked about polyamory in Texas back in 2009. How does it fit in now? As an Iranian woman, how do you identify yourself, and how do you feel has the Iranian community accepted and taken you in, and have you met other people that are polyamorous and also Iranian?
Yes, actually. So that's really been wonderful. As I've become more out about my polyamory, people have reached out, Iranian, non-Iranian, but I have met more Iranian people now. So I love being visible about it. Yeah. Right. And, because of the response of, like, because there is such a stigma in the Iranian community, I wasn't out for a long time. Me personally, in my own, like, even though I was practicing it, I wasn't out. So I think now that I've, like, when it was kind of hush-hush, it was, like, not as frowned upon. But now I'm, like, really out about it. So there are mixed reactions. There have been some people that are very supportive. And there are some people within my own family still that, definitely do not want that, definitely do not want me to be out about that. But the way, and I didn't come out for a long time because I was like, well, it's not just about me. Like, I'm pretty collectivistic. My values, being Iranian, being very much like, I put other people before myself. And so I thought, well, I don't want to be I don't want to shame my family, or, because it reflects on them as well. But then I realized, like, Iranian queer people are also my family.
Right.
Iranian polyamorous people are my community.
You're an amazing voice
and I want to center them. Yeah. I'm not going to center. I mean, as much as I don't want them to be hurt, but I'm also not going to center people's, I try to center the most marginalized voices in the room, right?
Incredible.
So if I'm talking about polyamory, I'm not going to center monogamous people, like, because they're already so centered in so many ways in society. Just like if I talk about queerness, or, you know, I'm not going to talk about, like, I'm not going to center heterosexual people. Like, I'm going to center my queer community because we're the ones that really need that support, right? Because so that's how I made peace with it. As far as how it relates, well, just the love of having guests. Like, just I was telling you earlier, like, we're so hospitable. And so for me, like, it makes me really welcome my partners into my heart. Because I'm like, y'all are making, not only are you making them happy, but you're like a guest. So like, I like to make them cookies if they come over, like little, there's these Iranian bow ties. So I feel like that really relates. And then Iranians also, there's just this like big, like theme of love, pre-colonization. Like there's always been a big theme of love. Even my namesake comes from the Shahnameh, which is a old, epic book of poetry, which it was a love story. So Iranians have, like, there's always been this, like, big, thing about love. And sometimes it was, like, there were aspects that were non-monogamous, not necessarily publicly, but there, it was, also love meant like spiritual and all these other forms of love too. So for me, it really relates to my heart as an Iranian in terms of not so much like, I think the way that it could be sometimes dogmatic, but more like the parts that I love about my culture, like the hospitality and joy and
That's amazing that you've integrated all these parts have come together. You're so sure of yourself. I love it. And the energy of having you in the room. I mean, I want to thank you so much for being here. And please tell everybody how they can find you.
Yes, so I am committed to posting content, daily content on polyamory and also like intersections of polyamory, like we were talking about today about queerness and, all these ways, I didn't even talk about, I'm neurospicy, I have ADHD, so that's also another thing that intersects with the polyamory, but I try to talk about those intersections, those other parts of us that also might relate. But I feel like, again, a lot of the things that I do share is about communication or like things that, again, could apply to a lot of different people, regardless of relationship structure. And so to follow me on Instagram, it's Dr. Badiee Polytherapist is my name. So DrBadie, Polytherapist. And then on TikTok, it's just Polytherapist.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Badiee. You're amazing. This was so enlightening and awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful chat.
Thank you for listening or watching the show. If you'd like to be featured on a new episode of the podcast, you can send us an email. It's at loveunleashed@jltv.tv. Or just shoot me a message on Instagram. It's at loveunleashed_Erin Davis.